Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing quite an iconic film. We are going to be talking about Se7en today. Why are we talking about Se7en today, actually? I mean, other than this is a great movie and we love an excuse to talk about it. But there's a very specific reason.
Yes, this year is the 30-year anniversary of Se7en. So I do think it's funny that we just celebrated our 7th birthday and now we're reviewing Se7en for its anniversary. I don't know. I think that's funny.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, within like weeks of each other, days of each other, honestly. Yeah, that is great. Okay, well, we love an excuse to talk about this movie. I think we briefly talked about it because it was on my list one year for our top 10 list because I just hadn't seen it yet. And obviously this is like such a well-known film. So we got to like talk about it for about a minute as we went through our list and we're marching from 10 to 1 on our list. So I'm excited to like fully deep dive talk about this movie because there's a lot here. And you are a big David Fincher fan as well. So it all is working together. Sarah, do you want to give an IMDb summary for Se7en?
Sure. Two detectives, a rookie and a veteran, hunt a serial killer who uses the 7 deadly sins as his motives.
Okay. And in Movies and Us tradition, what is your one-sentence summary for Se7en?
My one-sentence summary is, libraries really do have something for everyone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He could be there getting inspo or research,
It's all there.
That library is beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
I love that they're just like hanging out there in the warm green glow of the lights. Looks pretty great. My one-sentence summary is, John Doe's sermon attendance is tanking.
It sure is. Woo. It started off small. It's just getting smaller.
Yeah, arguably it got bigger at one point, and
Yes.
now it is at least one person smaller, that's for sure. Okay, well, let's dive in. There's so much to unpack and talk about thematically from a filmmaking perspective. There's so much here. We will give a short, brief kind of our thoughts about Se7en and maybe things that really stood out to us in this most recent watch. Then we'll give a spoiler alert. This is definitely a movie you do need to go in with a white canvas on. I know it's probably hard because there's so much like in media related to this movie, but if it hasn't been spoiled for you yet, go in fresh. I had the luck of somehow staying away from all of the like plot points of this film for so long that I got to watch this the first time fresh. And that is the way to do it. I really, this movie especially, that ending is firecracker. So, Sarah, what are your thoughts about Se7en? This is now your X numberth time, nth time watching. Yeah, how many times have you seen this? And then maybe some things that really stood out to you in this most recent watch. I always find it really fascinating.
Yeah, I've seen this, I don't know, maybe like 5 times by now. I had watched this again like a year ago. So it was already like pretty fresh still in my mind.
Yeah.
But man, it's always fun to revisit this film because you always find new things. You always see new things because there's just so much going on. I also just love, it's a whole vibe. This is just a dreary and melancholy, world-weary kind of movie. And I don't know, I love that vibe. Also, shout out to the weather in DFW yesterday when I was watching this, because it was stormy and rainy and dark and cloudy yesterday too. So the weather in DFW knew I was watching Se7en, and it accommodated, and that felt nice. But I think this time I was really able, especially because I had just watched it again a year-ish ago. And so everything was a lot more fresh in my mind. And so I was able to, I think, better pick up on some of those like setups and payoffs that happen throughout the film. And oftentimes it's just in like a little almost like throwaway line of dialogue that then is like foreshadowing something else that's going to come into the film later. And I was also just focused on how competent this killer is set up to be and how like ill-equipped these cops are set up to solve this case. And
Mm,
that tension of, I feel like in a lot of movies it's like, the good guys and the bad guys are evenly matched, and so it's this really interesting game of cat and mouse. And while watching Seven, it's almost like, man, these cops are almost like the underdogs in this scenario.
yeah.
And that's really interesting way to kind of frame this whole thing. So anyway, there's so much to talk about with this, but those were just a couple of the like high level things that I feel like I was able to focus on more this
Mm.
time around.
Yeah, yeah. And it's fascinating seeing our killer relish in knowing that he's outsmarting the system. Really. And the thing is he's right. Like he truly have put on a whole show for these folks to like run after his coattails. And this is my second time watching this. The last time I watched it, I think must have been at least like a year, 2 years, 3 years ago. I don't remember. Time is weird. Um, but I remember the first time around really following the killings and viewing this really from the lens of it being a detective story. And because that's how it's framed and that's what you expect and you want to solve the case, with our two protagonists. But this time around I really feel like Seven is more of a drama. It's more focused on these two protagonists and a lot of their lives and their families and the people in their orbit that inform who they are and the way that they shape and mold and impact each other over the course of the film. And then the detective story is kind of a backdrop because for all intents and purposes, they don't do that much detecting. They send some things off to a lab and have some results back, but for the most part, the bulk of what the movie seems to be more focused on is these two men and how they are foils at the beginning, but they shape and mold each other through so many of those filler moments of conversation of them at the bar or them in the car or them inviting each other to each other's homes. I feel like that's where the real arc of the movie seems to be like very interested in, and I felt like I had far more capacity to see some of those things unfold over the course of this film. And I think that informs so much of how this movie ends as well, and what this movie is saying about the state of the world and the state of our humanity and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to dive into some of those things because I found that to be so meaty and fascinating this time around. And everything else is there for color, there to be a backdrop, there to draw these things out of these two characters. But this film is so focused on really being a character study in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. This is, and both of these characters are so interesting too. But
Yeah.
I also think that they work so well because they're paired together. Like if this was just Somerset going after the serial killer, I think that would be interesting because like intellectually they're probably on the same level, but that would be more of that like cat and mouse kind of traditional story
Mm,
that we would expect. But I feel like Somerset paired with Mills is what really makes this so
mm,
interesting, especially because Somerset is on his way out and Mills is just coming in. There's this interesting dynamic between them, not only because of their personalities, but their like stages in life and their
yeah.
their positions on the force are so different. And I think that that just creates this really interesting equation for us to really kind of tease out who are these two people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And they are such foils to each other. I mean, it's very obvious, but I think in even in showcasing the spectrum of how we as humans react to the world and find ways to cope or hope or not hope anymore. Like, I think there's a lot there to discuss. So, uh, maybe we'll include a spoiler here because it's hard to talk about this movie without diving into some of the details and moments. So, if you haven't seen Seven yet, this is your spoiler alert. This is an incredible film. So much to sink your teeth into. with this movie, and just really well done from a filmmaking perspective, which we'll talk about some of those moments too. So Seven, yeah, spoiler alert, it's been 30 years. Go watch this movie. Okay. Where should we like double click on a little bit more? Maybe do we want to talk about this like these axes of Somerset and Mills? Maybe tell me a little bit more of your thoughts about them being paired together and kind of the journey that they go on over the course of the film.
Yeah, I particularly love the inclusion that Somerset is retiring and
Mm,
he doesn't want to be on the force anymore and nobody else wants him to be on the force anymore either. You know, the first time that we meet Somerset really is when this other cop at the crime scene is like, "Oh man, I can't wait until you're gone." Like he is a pain to everyone around him, but he's a brilliant detective.
yeah.
And I love that combination. Again, there's a million versions of this like brilliant detective that nobody likes kind of trope, but I feel like what what Morgan Freeman brings to this role is this, I don't know, it feels so grounded and it feels so
Yeah.
honest. This like, "Ugh, I'm just exhausted and I can't do this anymore." Like, I don't know,
I'm
you
tired.
feel that weariness and it's not too
Mm.
over the top. And so I love that. I love Somerset as character. But I think that bit about him just being like, "I'm done. I can't do this anymore." I think that for me really solidifies why the detectives are almost the underdogs in this, because the one who would be able to potentially figure this out is checked out. He wants to be gone. He will be gone in 6 days. And the one that's left is the hothead who is not going to be able to solve this case by himself at all.
Yeah.
And so I think that that is so smart to almost feel as though the deck is stacked against these two just because of the circumstances that they find themselves in and just the timing of it all. And
Mm.
I just think that that creates so much more tension throughout because it's like, y'all, like I'm rooting for you, but I don't know that you're gonna get this done. And that ticking time bomb essentially of Somerset's retiring in 6 days. He's retiring in 3 days. Oh, he's supposed to be gone, but he's gonna stay on for a few days. Like you're just like, they're
Yeah.
never gonna get this in this time frame. And I think that that
Mm.
just creates so much tension as these kills get more and more gruesome and just horrific throughout. So I don't know. I think that's a brilliant way to kind of frame this whole story.
Yeah, and we get to see those cards come up each time of it's now Friday, now it's Saturday, now it's Sunday. Like the we feel the time passing and the looming inevitability of, well, there's four more deadly sins. So that anticipation too of knowing that he's gonna strike next, but not knowing when and how and who. It's so true. I think that it's fascinating to see where Somerset and Mills start at the beginning of the film and where we end up. In a lot of ways, that conversation that they have at the bar, I think, is so fascinating. It's right kind of in the like beginning of the third act where they're talking about apathy and um, Somerset is preaching this whole thing to Mills around, yeah, well, of course, apathy is an easier solution, but love costs and you can't afford to be this naive. And I love the moment where Mills actually calls Somerset out and says, you're saying people, something along the lines, it's not the exact quote, okay, guys. But Mills says to Somerset, like, essentially, you're saying people don't care enough, but then therefore you don't care. And I think that is such a like calling out of what Somerset has recognized, which is that yeah, the world has become so apathetic, and there's a cynicism, a deep cynicism that he has about that. But Mills is the person that cares so deeply and kind of wears his heart in his sleeve. And I think a lot of the way the two shape and form each other by the end of the film is kind of really beautiful. Like, I remember this film being incredibly dark and cynical. And in a lot of ways, I think it's because John Doe is, and that is on full display. But if we look at the journey that both of these characters go on, especially Somerset's journey, where he chooses to stay at the end, and he's even says that like the world is worth fighting for. Like that is David Fincher hopefulness. If you ever did see it, like in this gruesome, dark film where the best of us has taken the worst act, with Mills choosing to shoot John Doe at the end, and yet our main protagonist that was deeply cynical and checked out at the beginning of this film is like, yeah, but the world's still worth fighting for. And that is Mills' legacy. That's Mills' impact on Somerset and choosing to believe, to hope for the good guys, the ones that care, the ones that maybe are deeply emotional and invested, but and has led them to do some wrong things, but they cared and their hearts were beating. That's inherently so hopeful. Like I think I was shocked by that at the end of this movie because in my mind, this film is coded to be incredibly dark and cynical and a really gruesome view of humanity and the world. But no, it's actually not at all. And that was shocking to me to really fully like bask in the second time around.
I love that. You are such a positive and hopeful person. Yes, it is there. You're not wrong, but I love that. Of all the things in Seven, it's like, let me just retain this little tiny bit of hope because we need it
We
after
need it.
enduring 2 hours of this dreariness. We need
Yeah.
that hope.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there's like a very real part of this that, people can fixate on too, which is essentially that Mills chooses to take to be overcome by his wrath and his rage and chooses to shoot John Doe at the end. Like kind of I was thinking a lot about Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight, like the best of us, the ones that we thought were good, ultimately became bad. But I think that is true on the surface, but I think it's more complex than that because he chooses to shoot him out of pain, out of care, out of love for this person that he like invested his life into. And I think the key detail with the reveal of the baby is what pushes him over the edge too. I think without that, he might not have, but that was far too deep of a wound for him to figure out how to react to in that moment. And he chooses violence. He chooses to kill, but it comes from this place of deep humanity too, and so yeah, it is cynical. It's a rough view, like he does do a very bad thing, but it comes from a place of, I don't even want to say goodness, that's far too generous, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it comes
I'm
from a
trying
very
here.
human place. Yeah.
Yes,
No, that
yes.
because he does have like moments of violence throughout the
The whole
film.
movie, yeah.
Yeah, but like that's not like the main defining factor. The main thing that drives Mills is not necessarily like anger and violence and all of those
Mhm.
things. And so I totally agree that ending scene as he's contemplating and processing like what do I do? Um there's
Yeah.
so many different emotions and factors that are running through his head, and we've also seen earlier in the film, makes me think of, after they go on the whole chase with John Doe and they're back at his apartment and Mills wants to go in and Somerset is telling him, no, don't go in. We can't get a, we need a warrant. We need probable cause and we don't have that, yada, yada, all of that. And then Mills is like, okay, yeah, I agree. And then he kicks the door open. Like it's that like impulsive, like, I know that this is wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway because whatever the justification is that he has in his own
Yeah.
mind to make it right. And so I also see that ending bit in addition to the pain and the anguish and the horror and all of
Mm,
those things that he's also going through. It's this like impulsive, like, I know this is
it's
wrong,
true.
but I have to do this kind of
Yeah.
vibe. And I feel like that kicking in the door scene almost sets up kind of where we see him at the end in his decision to kill John Doe.
Yeah, no, for sure, absolutely. The the foreshadowing of why we believe and buy his choice at the end there has been set up the whole film. I love thinking about the perspective of John Doe and that scene far earlier in the film where they're outside apartment 306, um, and they're in the stairwell, and Mills is yelling so passionately at that intrusive photographer journalist that we eventually find out is John Doe, but almost John Doe hatching his plan for the ending of his sermon series, from that moment, and identifying, because John Doe is so good at reading people, identifying like, this is someone that can be pushed to the edge, and kind of that emotional outburst, like, ooh, he's like, I can use this to showcase like how much human nature is prone to and can indulge in those feelings of anger and rage and wrath. And I love that in that scene, Somerset's response to Mills yelling at at John Doe, the photographer in disguise, he goes, "It's impressive to see a man feeding off of his emotions." And I thought that is perfectly showcasing the dichotomy of these two men as well. Somerset, even in the ending scene, is so grounded and level headed in arguably like the most dire circumstances that he could be in. And yet he is still cool, calm, and collected. And we see that Mills is unable to manage a lot of that internal turmoil and kind of these outbursts, and even on the cab ride to at the ending scene, even the cab ride to the location, like we see that John Doe's getting under Mills's skin, and he's flinging these like insults and whatnot, and creating this like power dynamic, and kind of can't help but indulge in the power trip for a moment. And it comes from a place of like justice and like righteous anger, but it is still anger and rage nonetheless.
And I love when they're driving John Doe going on their little field trip because Somerset lets Mills go. He's just, okay, this conversation's going to happen and I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to drive my car. And then every once in a while after like Mills gets too hot, then Somerset will come in and ask a probing question every once in a while. And I
Yeah.
just find that really fascinating. And again, I think it's almost this like they're not well suited for this task because ordinarily I feel like, especially in a film like this, you'd have a like, okay, we're going to strategize. You're going to be good cop. I'm going to be bad cop. Or, like you're going to have some sort of a plan going into how this drive is going to go. Cause presumably they have what, like hours with him in the car? Like you would come
Yeah.
into that with a plan and be like, okay, we're going to try and get some stuff out of him. This is the angle. This is what we're going to, just
That's
have
true.
some sort of idea of what you're going to say, but they just kind of seem like they're winging it.
Going on a road trip.
Going
Get
on a
some
road
snacks,
trip.
stop at the
You don't
gas
plan
station.
out your road trip, just YOLO. And so
Mm,
I think that whole conversation is so interesting because I feel like throughout the entire thing, John Doe has the upper hand the
yeah.
whole time. Like
Yeah.
it's never in question if Mills has regained control or like Mills has surprised him in some way. Like, no, John Doe is fully in control of that conversation. In addition to being in control of the location that they're going, the fact that they're in
Yeah.
the car, like John Doe is manipulating all of it. And that has gotten under Mill's skin so much that he cannot handle it. And you just
Mhm.
see so much of that bubbling up in him, which leads to such an interesting conversation in that car. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, those dynamics are wild.
And it's neat in that car conversation how we see that it's Mills's ego that is hurt and bruised, because when John Doe starts to taunt him almost and say, you didn't have any idea who I was. Like the only reason I'm here in your custody is because I chose to give myself over to you. Like you had not an idea. And that hurts your ego, if you're like trying to be this really great cop in this new city and you've got these ambitions and you want to demonstrate your skill sets. Like, yeah, shoot. And Mills knows that he's right. That's why it gets under his skin. And that's why it hurts and bruises his ego. And that's why he like peacocks and puffs his chest up and all of his feathers to try and intimidate him. But it's so clear that his ego's just hurt. And because he knows that he's right. And they were lost. They had no idea who this man was. And I also love in the car sequence that every time Mills starts to like become a loose cannon and kind of get really like hot headed, there's this dedicated shot to Somerset just looking over at him. There's like 2 or 3 shots like that where Somerset is keeping an eye on Mills and recognizing like, oh, there's this thing that's doing in him. And so we know that Somerset sees this quite clearly, which I think is really powerful because it sets up later on in that scene that, oh, the minute Somerset sees the head in the box, like he knows what this is all setting up for. And so that's why he goes running, begging Mills to put his gun down because he knows, John Doe's seen this, he's using this, and he's seen the whole plan now. He sees the whole thing so clearly. And I think that's notable because it's almost like Somerset is just as smart as John Doe is, maybe one step behind every step of the way, but he sees everything as clearly as John Doe sees.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I find the pairing of Somerset and Mills together so
Mm,
interesting because Somerset is operating in a different way than Mills, and he
yeah.
understands John Doe better than Mills ever would be able to. And those two having to work together
Mm,
to apprehend John Doe, and Mills taking like letting Somerset take the lead even though he doesn't want to, I think also reveals some interesting things about Mills as well.
yeah.
So I love all of these pieces of how these two characters are constructed to make this a a different version of a detective story than I feel like we've seen before. Like it's playing with a lot of the same kind of tropes that we've seen, but it does it in a different way just because of the some of the combinations of character traits, but then also
Mm,
those circumstances surrounding these characters that makes it much more interesting. It makes their dynamic really interesting to watch throughout the film.
hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They're they're kind of these two opposing like axes or parts of the what's it called, the dichotomy, that are constantly ebbing and flowing closer to each other sometimes and then farther away and then closer to each other and sometimes farther away, and using and leveraging and learning from each other in some ways and then butting heads as well. So yeah, they're the kind of like where their planetary bodies are in orbit together over the course of the film is fascinating to see that ebb and flow as the film unfolds. Yeah, so good. So good.
And their
I love the
orbit,
moments where
yeah.
Mills is right too, and
Yeah.
he kind of helps Somerset and comes with an idea or a breakthrough that Somerset wouldn't have gotten to, or maybe taken longer too. Those moments too, where someone's like, "Yeah, good job, that was really good." What were you say?
No, he's not like completely incompetent. You know,
Yeah,
he's not just this like bumbling kid. And he says it throughout, like, I am a detective too. Like, I've done this. I'm
yeah,
not a bad cop. And there are those moments where we see, like, oh no, he's not bad. He's just not operating in the same way that John Doe and Somerset operate. He has a different
yeah.
skill set that he brings to the table. Yes, he's unpolished. Yes, he's a hothead, but he is able to do the job. He's
Hmm.
not able to do this job by himself, but he is able to be a detective. And it's nice
Yeah.
to see those little moments throughout as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's like a overly simplistic version of this where Mills is just this like incredibly naive, hot-headed, young, new detective that is like thinking that he's better than he is and wreaking havoc. Like, and you know that's like even greater dichotomy, which I think the film strikes the right balance of him being a little less experienced, him being much more idealistic, but also being a hothead, but also being really clever sometimes and competent and can hold his own in a lot of the scenes where they're on the crime scene and coming through with new discoveries. Like he's pulling his weight, which I think helped us buy into their relationship more. He does get really frustrating over the course of the film, though, which I think is part of the point. I was feeling that far more this time around than the first time around.
I also love that both Somerset and Mills feel like real people.
Mm,
Um, a lot of times I feel like in movies when you have this like really intelligent cop paired with like the more like street smart kind of cop, um, their personalities almost feel unrealistic. Like the one that's really like book smart has no social skills and has to rely on the other one for all the social skills, but they don't know anything in books. And it's such like a caricature of real
mm.
traits. But I feel like Somerset and Mills both have a balance of those things. Like Somerset is not the most emotionally aware person, but he can be good with people when he wants to, and he can have insights into people and can read people in a way that I feel like you wouldn't normally see in a movie like this. And
Yeah.
then, like Mills too, he has moments where he's charismatic, but he's also a tool a lot of the time. And so there's this interesting balance of sometimes he can be a smooth talker, but sometimes his mouth gets him in trouble. But it all feels like he's a real person. They both feel like real people. And I think that that helps make this film so entertaining to watch 30 years later, is because they feel real in addition to all of the other things that make this film so great.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. That's so true. It's like they 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 both are such archetypes that we've seen a million times over. And yet they don't feel like they're playing into archetypes, even though there's a comfort, I think, in in the opening of the movie that we recognize, like, this is that kind of character. This is that kind of character. But they slowly become, I think, a little bit more different and complex than what we would expect them to be. Like, and I think maybe also too, just the bigness and the spectacle of the murders themselves almost offer this huge backdrop for them that um, even as larger in life that as these two characters are, like they still feel so grounded because they're in a world that is uh, showcasing this huge bigness almost, like the weird visual that I have is like when you're watching a show and or like a musical, like the set design is so flamboyant and big that like your main characters, if they wear just like a tux, like it feels kind of just normal and not over the top. They're not overdressed because everything else is so vibrant. So I wonder if just like the setting and the context they find themselves are larger than life. Therefore, they feel like that familiar grounding place for us to like lean into and our connection to something that's real and grounded in a world that is larger than life murders.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point because we need something to latch on to. We need
Yeah.
something to be able to follow. And if the the murders are so big, so like spectacular, not in a good way,
Yeah.
uh and the characters are also these really really big personalities, then I feel like that is just like too much. Or if the
Mhm.
characters are too outside of the mainstream or like outside of the norm of what we're used to, then we would feel kind of like unmoored as we're trying to
Yeah.
like figure out the murders with them. So I feel like these characters are archetypes enough that we know what to expect, but they're interesting and complex enough that they're not boring to watch. And so
Yeah.
it's this like perfect balance to help us stay engaged in a film that honestly would be really easy to check out of, just because it is so dark, it is so cynical and dreary for so much of the film. And like, it's just the moments with Gwyneth Paltrow are like the sunshine moments in the film, basically, and everything else
Yeah.
is dark and dreary. Everything else is gruesome and awful. Like, this would be a very easy movie to just feel overwhelmed and just check out. But I think because of these characters and they're so interesting together, we're willing to
Mhm.
continue to trudge through what is a very, very dark film to get through.
Yes. Very much so. I think that a lot of those moments are so necessary for us as the viewer and pacing with this film. Like that dinner scene. Um oh my gosh, I was just like grateful to be in a home with there's a shot of the record player, and I'm like, oh, and music, and there's good food and there's the candles are lit. Like it almost is also allowing us to feel what Somerset may be feeling as well, because every shot of Somerset in his home, it is dark and shadowy, and he's lonely, and there's it's just gray everywhere. There's no warmth, and then knowing that he does not get any of that warmth at his job, like just that feeling of Somerset almost walking into this home that has warmth and connection and life in it. Feeling what he must be feeling, but also me as a viewer, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we've been doing some hard detecting work. I also need a great meal, some nice wine, some candlelight, music for a moment. And um, I think that moment too with Tracy is a really great setup for the ending payoff. With what Mills chooses to do at the end, because he did, and understanding perhaps like some of John Doe's thinking around like the envy too, of like, yeah, he had a home, he had potentially a home that was growing and someone that loved him. I think the little detail of them being high school sweethearts, like adds to that warmth and that feeling of what it's like to have love and connection that in a lot of ways John Doe is devoid of and starved of, but also Somerset is starved of too. And him sharing with Tracy and kind of mourning this other version of his life that could never be, I think also plays into some of that, like the stakes of the ending and also our empathy for the ending. I think that's a great like kind of two axes again in the film of here's where it was and how good it was, and so when that's lost, you can imagine how tragic and heart wrenching that is for Mills to then make that choice. So yeah, a rare moment of war in this film, that dinner scene, much needed.
It
We
is
never get
much
it again.
needed. Yes. And I love that even in these warm moments, there are still difficulties as well. So it feels like it fits with the film. You're not
Yeah.
like knocked out of this dreariness and then you go to this perfect warm sunshiny moment and then you're back to the dreariness. Like, there's still some difficulty in those sunshiny moments with Tracy's character, or with Tracy. And the apartment that shakes, that must suck. That
Yeah.
must be absolutely awful to live in. And I love that it's this sharing of difficulty and this uncomfortable experience together, and then they laugh together, but are like, Mills is like, why are we laughing? Why are you laughing? Stop it. And so I love those. Or like, Tracy is miserable and she doesn't know
Yeah.
anybody in the city and she doesn't have a job yet and she doesn't know what school she's going to work at because the schools are rough here. Like, there's so much difficulty also in those moments, and I think that helps maintain a continuity across the film, so
Hmm.
that we are able to welcome the warmth and be like, oh yes, some time with Tracy, this is lovely, without it
Yeah.
feeling like we're just plopped into a different movie all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. There's there's a realism to it. I think it's notable that Tracy's arguably like one of the most cynical characters in this entire movie, like far more than her husband, and that's for sure. Just those conversations. She's not just there to be like warm, wonderful, sweet fabulous wife, uh, something for Mills worth fighting for, you know? Um, she has her own convictions and journey and conversations with Somerset. And, you know, that conversation they have over the meal where she's like, this world sucks. Like, I don't want to bring a child into this. Like, arguably, maybe even more cynical than Somerset is about the state of the world, you know? And I love that pairing too between where her mind is at and Mills's arguably more hopefulness and idealism and wanting to make a difference in the world and wanting to fight for justice. Like he still hopes, and she's kind of not, and trying to just survive and try and make the best wise choice that she can with the things that she can steward or not steward. And um, I think that's fascinating too, to weave into this film that is so cynical, and showcasing this female character that is not hoping to have this baby and build this family together. No, she's actually like going behind his back to be like, yo, maybe I don't want this baby because this world sucks and I don't think we're prepared for it. You know, I think that's also really fascinating and notable as well.
And also helps explain why she would go to Somerset, you know? There's that, like, kindred spirit
Yeah.
thing almost of like, "Hey, you're melancholy as hell. Let's talk about that because that's how
Yeah.
I'm feeling too." So
Yeah.
I at first, it's almost like, wow, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would Tracy be so interested in sitting down with Somerset? And she's like, oh, well, I don't know anybody. You're the only person that I know. But then the more
Mm-hmm.
that you think about it, the more that it's like, oh no, like there's something there that she like recognizes in him, that she's like, okay, I understand. We can probably understand each other more than Mills will understand me. Somerset will
Yeah.
probably get where I'm at. So it
Yeah.
just I love that, like, and that's just a microcosm of so much of this film. Like the more that you think about an individual piece, the more layers there are to it that you can
Yeah.
unpack and explore.
Yeah. No, it's so, yeah, that kindred spiritness. They immediately connect with each other. And you get the feeling too that Somerset welcomes just someone to connect with as well. Like I think the shots of him in his home by himself, I mean, arguably like the very beginning of the movie, but we also get to revisit it again and again. I think is so important for us to also feel so invested and empathize and understand who Somerset is and how much he's given and sacrificed for this job, for hoping to take care of his city with his life, you know, and even the loss of his family or potential family to be in order to give more of himself to this, or not wanting to like bring another like people into this like line of work. I mean, it's a trope too. Once again, like we know that trope of like the detective that is unable to have relationships and families because he's given everything and it's dangerous, and he has to work long hours and whatnot, like unable to possibly have a family life. It's so done, but we feel it. We feel it with Somersault, and we mourn for it for him too. But we also respect him for it, for caring so deeply. And even by the end of the film, I think that's why his line is so, again, more hopeful than I expected, because he's choosing to say, like, I want to fight for better. And there is this world is worth fighting for. And that's what he's given his life to, really. So, yeah.
And I love that the whole like vibe of the film matches up with that feeling that he has. Like it
Mm,
really does feel like we've entered into Somerset's worldview, and I think that helps it not feel like this like tropey thing that we've seen
mm,
before, but because we're in it and we're seeing it, we're feeling it, we're hearing it with him, then it makes sense because we're
yeah.
able to empathize with him more because we are also walking through this dark and dreary world with him. It's not
Mm,
that the detective is kind of like out of sorts with the rest of the vibe of the film, but we are seeing it through his eyes. So then it's like, well, yeah, of
yeah.
course you're going to be weary when you're at retirement age after policing this city. Like we've spent
Yeah.
20 minutes in it and we're already ready to be done. Like it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and his journey, Somerset's journey is going from being like ready to throw in the towel, done what he needs to do, a form of apathy, arguably, that he has experienced that he so quickly is judging the rest of the world for, but that he has himself. And by the end of the film, his journey is to care, to continue to care, to continue to do the hard, tiring, exhausting effort to care about something, someone, and the city and care for it in the ways that he can, with the skill sets that he can. But yeah, that and we kind of have this feeling at the end of the film too, where it's it's good for the city, but it's also good for him too. You know, like all those shots of him just like listening to the metronome in his apartment. I'm like, you have so much to give. You know, I mean, maybe if he wanted to like take a little paradise vacation somewhere, like maybe he needs that too, tbh. But it feels like right for this character by the end too to like continue his line of work. Like sometimes when I see a character do that, I'm like, oh, I just want you to get out of the system, go enjoy your life, go find something new. But I don't know, it's something with Somerset. You're like, this is gonna be good. Yeah, maybe that's
Yep.
just me. Maybe I should want better for more for him. Maybe rest, would be nice.
Yeah, I think he deserves a really long vacation,
And then
with pay, some
and
good
then come back.
therapy, like,
Yeah.
we need to make some changes in our life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, other big things that we wanted to mention with Seven before we wrap soon.
Oh gosh, there are so many things. One of the things that I really appreciated in this film, I mentioned it briefly, but like all those setups and payoffs throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them that I really paid attention to this time is that when it's at the first crime scene when we're first introduced to Mills and he berates this beat cop and is like, how do you know that he's dead? Like, did you check? And
Yeah.
he's so rude about it. And when Somerset asks him, his response is, how many times has Barney Fife found dead bodies that weren't dead? And he's so indignant about it. And then what, 3 kills later, they find Sloth and they're all in there, and then Sloth breathes again. And so I just love those little things
Mm,
where it's like, they bring up something and then 30 minutes later there's this little payoff that happens, and that happens over and over again throughout the film. So just shout out to the writing of this and that intentionality to have so many of those setups and payoffs throughout the film that help us to like stay engaged and continue to be guessing and being able to be like, oh wait, you said
mm.
that earlier, I know what's going on. I loved all of those little details.
Also, so fitting for a detective film too. To be rewarding the viewers for paying attention to the little details, which is vital in the field of detecting. It's kind of a neat little like nod to like you as the viewer. Like you're gonna get sweet satisfaction out of this one. So hang on to every word. Yeah. But also the level of detail it takes to ensure the timing is right in those payoffs too, that they come late enough that you almost forget about them a little bit. And then you're like, I remember that. When they're too close together too, it kind of feels a little cheap. You're like, I knew you were going to do that. And you did it. But that
Yeah.
leaving that time for the payoffs to come later is really satisfying. One of the things I wanted to give a shout out to is the cinematography, particularly where it indulges and shines the most is in the chase sequence between Mills and Doe. It lasts far longer than I remember it lasting, but also I realized we don't actually get a lot of big high adrenaline moments in this film. In my mind, in my memory, that this was high action, high adrenaline, but I think it's because we're going from like gruesome murder to gruesome murder, which is like very adrenaline inducing. But the actual amount of like high action adrenaline actually is happens, I would argue, in that fight chase sequence and then maybe at the end of the film in that big explosive ending. But I just love the way that this whole sequence is shot. In my mind, I was like, we eventually need to do a frame by frame on this at some point. But it's so artistic in the way that it's shot in the angles, and almost feels like a graphic novel or a cartoon that is able to play with these really artistic choices of the puddle and seeing the gun barrel with just water washing over it. A lot of shots of the entire frame where it's almost just all darkness, and we see a sliver between the two cars with Mills peeking through and then moving to the next moment past this small sliver, but everything else in the frame is like pitch black. There's just this use of the stairwells, also just so fun and so genius. So I don't know, I ate up the stylization and the artistic choices in that entire fight chase sequence. And it just feels different from the way that the rest of the film is shot. So it's almost this like artistic, dreamlike sequence of this high intensity first interaction between our two protagonists and our primary target and the villain. And I also just love that it happens so late in the movie. I think I jotted down as around at like the 1 hour 15-minute mark. So it happens quite late too, which I think is very fitting because we've been waiting to see who and what is behind all of these things. And when we do, we get this kind of feast for the eyes. So I just ate up the visuals in that sequence, and the way that it's paced and shot was so fun. I want to watch it again.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, we'll do a frame by frame of that one of these days. That's a great idea. But the other thing that I love about that chase sequence is it subverts what chase sequences normally do that drive me bananas, because normally in a chase sequence you got the cop following the bad guy and the cop knows exactly where the bad guy is going to go, and if you have two choices of going left or right, they always choose the correct one and find the person, and it's so annoying because I'm like, how did you know they were going to go that way? You had 50-50 chance. How did you choose the right one every single time? This does not make sense. And so I love in this one, Mills hesitates. Like, you see him questioning, like, oh my gosh, which way should I go?
Mm,
He hides behind corners sometimes and is like gingerly peeking out from them. And you'll see that in like other cop shows and movies and stuff. But I love the way that he does it and the way that he hesitates for so long of like, okay,
I don't know what
if I
to
go
do.
around this corner, I might get shot. Am I willing to do that? And then
Mm.
he's like, okay, I guess it's my job. Okay, here we go. Like, you see that
And he gets
multiple
shot
times and he
at.
gets shot at. So, he it was important to count those costs before he ran, through guns ablazing. But I love the way that it's paced, and
Yeah.
the fact that Somerset also is just off over here, like
Right.
doing his own thing. Like, I think that's so funny too. And you see that in shows
So
all the
unhelpful.
time of like, the primary person is following the perp going in the directions that they went, and then the other person goes the back way and they magically meet up at the right spot together.
Yeah.
And I love that Somerset gets to the alley so
Too late.
late. Like,
So good.
you are waiting there for so long when John Doe has the gun at Mills's head for so long, and then Somerset finally shows up after the whole thing is basically over. And so I love all of those little pacing details to make this,
Yeah.
even though it follows a lot of the same like beats that you're used to in a cop chase sequence, it makes it fresh and exciting because things go wrong and
Yeah.
things don't go perfectly, and he doesn't always make the right choices as he's chasing the dude, and Mills gets hurt. Like, all of these things make it feel real, and I think a lot more interesting than a lot of the chase sequences that we normally get, in addition to, like you said, it being shot really, really beautifully.
So good. Yeah. No, that's so true. I actually was expecting Somerset to show up, as John Doe has the gun to his partner's head, and then Somerset's gonna show up and like shoot him in the leg, and then they're gonna have a little kerfuffle, and then John Doe's obviously gonna like run off and limp away and get away, but you know Somerset's gonna show up for his partner, and he just doesn't. He like comes after John Doe's already chosen to spare uh Mills's life. And then Somerset's like, "Hey, what happened? What happened here? You okay?" Yeah, it changes our expectation because we are waiting for the moment where, of course, he's going to show up at just the right time to ensure he protects his partner, and it doesn't happen that way at all. I love that. I was waiting. I've watched this movie and I forget that that doesn't happen because we're just trained to know that that's what always happens in the movies. Yeah, it's so good.
Those little subversions are so fun. I
So
love that.
satisfying. So satisfying. Another really great, just like filmmaking technique moment that I really love is in the ending scene. We see the box, and it takes us so long to open the box. It's so great. We're itching, dying, waiting to know what's in the box. And arguably, we'd actually never know what's really in the box. It's just implied. But we get to see the box. We get to see them talk about the box. We get to see Somerset's reaction to the box. You know, like I just the amount of tension building in that is so juicy. So fabulous use of the box. It's that quote. I think it's Hitchcock that says like you show them the gun or the knife under the table or something like that, but you don't actually fire the gun. You wait and you wait and you wait and you wait. But just showing it already creates the anticipation, and I feel like the box is that in that ending scene. So genius use of a cardboard box. Well done, David Fincher and team. I loved
And I
it.
love that. I love that we never see inside of the box. We never
That's
see
good.
her head in the box.
Thank God.
And yes, yeah, in a movie as gruesome as this, we
We
didn't
don't need
need
that.
that to be the cherry on top. But I love that it's so visceral the way that it's shot and the way that Somerset reacts to it. It feels like you have seen a head in the box, but you haven't. And so I
Yeah.
love all of those filmmaking components coming together to where we feel like we've experienced this. We know the horror that he's experiencing it, but we haven't seen it. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, really, really brilliant editing, camera work, writing, acting, all of it just coming together to create such an influential scene.
Yeah, yeah, it's so good. It's so good. And we then carry the freshness of that horror that we feel into this confrontation where we can really understand Mills's rage, Mills's horror as well, and you know, it complicates how we feel about the whole thing as he has this opportunity to take out the person that is responsible for that. And we have to like wrestle with our own emotions and feelings. And, like, what do we want to see from this ending scene, you know? Yeah, it's so good. I love the close up shots of the two men's faces in that ending scene. Like we see the turmoil and the internal it's like wrestling and the understanding, the full understanding of the consequences that Mills knows he's going to have to take, and yet he chooses it anyway. I love that he's clear minded, it seems, about what this means. And he's not just deluded into thinking that he's going to get away with it. Like you see that he knows he's choosing this. And then just the look on Morgan Freeman's face is tragic as well, knowing that this he can't help this poor man. Yeah, young soul that is about to choose a lot for his life.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
it's the human toll and the piece of like giving John Doe the satisfaction because this is exactly what John Doe wants. And so it's the like human moral side with Mills, but then also the intellectual side with John Doe and he's like just don't do it. Like no matter which way you look at this, don't make this choice. And of course Mills makes the choice.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So good. Um, Another really great like setup and payoff for that, I guess, is Somerset earlier in the film tells Mills, "Don't call him a lunatic. Don't make that mistake." And it's neat to see the way that that comes full circle by the end as well. Oh, it's so good. Any other last big things that we wanted to mention before we wrap? We could talk about Seven for so
I
long.
know.
There's so
Can I
much here.
have 3 quick things at the
Okay.
end?
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, one thing that I really appreciated this go around is the shifting of the detective's expectations about this killer.
Mm,
So the first crime took 12 hours, they say, for this to happen, and two trips to the supermarket. And they're looking at that and going, wow, that's a really long time to be
mm,
with this victim. Like, wow, how could you spend 12 hours with this one dude and
mm,
not get caught? And that confidence that a killer must have. Then the next kill was over a long weekend. So that's 3 days with this victim. And then the next victim that they find is
yeah.
Sloth, who had been in that apartment for a year.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate how those three, we learn so much about the timing of John Doe's actions, because it's showing the detectives who they're dealing with and the type of person they're dealing with, and it's recalibrating our expectations as the audience of, this isn't
Yeah.
somebody who just came up with this, but they have been planning and plotting this for literal years. And now they
Hmm.
are executing this. And that's just a different level of criminal. So I
Hmm.
don't know, I was really fixated on that this time and appreciating how those build on each other and change kind of our expectations of who we're dealing with.
Hmm. I love that.
Yeah. I don't know. There's something about like if you give me numbers in a movie, I'm going to fixate on them. And that was what happened here. Another thing that I appreciated is for the first half of the movie or so, Mills is always wearing a basketball tie. It has a basketball hoop and basketballs all over it in a pattern. And then in the
So
back
good.
half of the film, he is only wearing a black tie. And so I it happens, I think, after the John Doe chase scene. So like I don't know if it's just like a practical thing of like he had to have his like tie cut because of medical things. I don't know if that's a thing that makes sense. But I love symbolically it shows him going from this like naive new, not to the force, but new to this area cop. And then that second half, he starts to become a little bit more jaded and cynical and kind of through his tie, kind of foreshadowing, this like darkness that is going to start to like quote unquote infect him as he's spending more and more time on this case and like wrapped in John Doe and John Doe's world. I think that's especially notable when he's in John Doe's apartment,
Mhm.
surrounded by everything. Um, anyway, so I just thought that that was interesting that his
That's
basketball
cool.
tie is no more in the second half of the film.
Yeah, that's a cool little detail. Yeah, he's getting serious now.
Right? We don't we
Yeah.
don't got time for a basketball tie. We got a killer to catch,
No,
my
it's no fun
dude.
and games. No, no more fun and games. Well, and also it's like this loss of innocence, perhaps.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great.
And then my third little thing, and I really hate to give this shout out, but I have to because he's so good. He's a terrible person, but he was a great actor.
Oh
Kevin
yeah,
Spacey as John Doe is
really good.
just incredible.
I
Like
know.
holy moly. How is he so good in this role? He's incredible. Like
Hmm.
just awful, creepy, like, ugh, you don't want to spend any time with him, but he has this like charisma to him too, where you're like, I don't want to be listening to this, but I'm also listening to this at the same time, and I'm not turning away. Like, there's so much to that performance. He is perfectly creepy, just getting under everybody's skin, getting under our skin as the audience. Like, ugh, what a perfect performance. It really adds so much to this film. Like,
It
he's so
does.
good. He's only on screen for a short little bit of time, but holy cow, what an impact he made.
It it really feels like we buy that this type of person could be behind the amount of like drama and spectacle that he wants to create with this terrifying sparkle in his eye, truly. I had a like kind of like comical thought when he's in the cab and he's having this whole conversation and he says, this is going to be studied for years after I'm gone. This is going to be studied. Like people are going to pay attention. And I just thought about at a meta level, Seven is one that we have studied and it is to be studied and he knows it. So I just thought it was funny to imagine that as like a kind of a meta commentary on like the legacy of Seven in general, and the way that there has been this like fixation with this movie. And John Doe kind of talking about his whole show and spectacle that he's created, but at a meta level, like what David Fincher and team have created with Seven and having this weird like sense of desiring to study the depths of it that the people in the film world and beyond definitely have with this movie. It's just kind of funny parallel echoing pairing together.
Mm-hmm. I mean, here we are 30 years later reviewing it.
Yeah.
So, and there will be more Seven content on the feed. So, yeah, we are we are part of that meta commentary right there.
Yep. Yep. Much always to talk about with Seven. I think it'll be fascinating. Like 30 years from now, when we watch this film again, new things will come to the surface. This is one that I think definitely everyone is captivated by in some way. So this was our review of Seven. It's been 30 years, 30-year anniversary of this film's release, so we had to celebrate it. You can find this film available to stream on Peacock right now. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spend time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your favorite parts about Seven and how this film has aged with you over time. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at moviesanduspod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. Check out our website, andusmedia.co, for the latest on Movies and Us and our other podcast, TV and Us. We'll be back next week with a little, still talking about Seven, a little follow-up. We're going to be doing an And Us Voices episode for Seven, which is going to be really fun. We're going to bring together a bunch of our pod friends and share some takes about this film, some picks as well. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.